A 9-year-old girl was crying, begging for help as her stepmother yelled at her and her little brother. Then, their father walked in unexpectedly, and what happened next shocked everyone. Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Mark Johnson sat in his spotless, modern office on the top floor of Central Tower, one of the most prestigious buildings in downtown Chicago. On his desk rested a heavy gold-plated pen. He signed documents one after another like a machine, the bright lights glinting off his designer watch. Everything around him screamed money, success, and power. Yet deep inside, he felt completely empty. Mark had once known what real happiness felt like. His first wife, Sarah, had been the love of his life. His little girl, Mia, used to run through their backyard laughing, her hair flying in the wind. And then there was Jamie, the baby, just 8 months old. Jamie had been born on the very same day Sarah passed away. The doctor said she'd suffered severe complications during childbirth, and they couldn't save her. For Mark, it was like the world stopped turning that day. He drowned himself in work, trying to escape his grief. And that's when Veronica came into his life. Be loved and live without fear. So, where are you watching this story from? And what time is it there? If you're enjoying today's video, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. She had been a close friend of Sarah's. She walked into the house with a kind smile, taking charge of everything that was broken. To Mark, she was the perfect woman he needed. If Sarah had been the light, then Veronica was his rescue. She held both children as if they were her own, caring for them like a loving mother. Seeing this, Mark felt better. He thought, at least the kids have a strong maternal figure. It's better than growing up with just a grieving father. He was always grateful that she carried the weight he had left behind. Today, after a month away on business, Mark signed the last file, stood up, and saw himself in the tall wall mirror. His face looked tired, his eyes sad. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. He wanted to go home early without telling anyone. He wanted to bring them a small surprise. Maybe Mia would run into his arms. Maybe Jamie would smile when he held him. The idea made him feel warm for the first time in months. Mark grabbed his coat and left quickly before his assistant could ask another question. His luxury car sped down the highway back to his large house in the suburbs. That house, once full of laughter and warmth, was now a place Mark rarely stayed, just stopping between trips. But today felt different. He wanted to see his family. The grand iron gates opened, and Mark stepped into the large foyer. Everything was strangely silent. The golden light from the beautiful chandelier fell on the marble floor. He set his briefcase down on the table and took off his coat. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, he heard the faint sound of a child crying. It was Jamie. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Mark froze. Between the weak sobs, another voice followed. Trembling, small, and broken. Please don't hurt me and my brother anymore. Mark's body went rigid. It was Mia's voice, his daughter, choked and pleading. His entire body tensed. His heart seemed to stop. He moved slowly down the hall. He stopped just out of sight, behind the threshold leading to the living room. The scene before him made it hard to breathe. Mia, 6 years old, her black hair messy, her pink dress dirty and torn, was sitting on the floor. Her small arms were wrapped tightly around Jamie. The baby's face was red from crying. His tiny hands reached out, clinging to his sister. Mia bowed her head, her shoulders shaking with fear. Standing in front of them was Veronica. She wore a tight red dress. Her black hair was perfectly styled. Her face was covered in makeup, but her voice was nothing like the sweetness she showed Mark. It was sharp, every word cutting like broken glass. Shut up. How many times have I told you? Don't bother me. If you don't listen, I'll throw you both out on the street. Mark rushed forward, placing himself between Veronica and the children. Stop. His voice was harsh but firm. He reached out, trying to take Jamie. His movements were clumsy after so long without holding his son. Let me hold him. Mia, come here to Daddy. The girl froze. Her fingers gripped the hem of her dress. Mark hesitated. His hand hung in the air before he pulled it back. He stood in front of them like a wall, protecting them. A flash of anger crossed Veronica's eyes, sharp as a needle. In an instant, it vanished behind a kind smile. "Oh, you're back," she said sweetly. "I was just teaching the children some rules. They were being too rowdy." She moved closer, placing a light hand on Mark's jacket. Her voice became soft as honey. "You must be tired after getting home. Don't get so upset over a little childish crying." The doctor said, "Children need rules, right? I've been with them all month. I understand how they behave better than anyone." Mark held Jamie tightly. His throat felt like it was burning. He looked at Mia and saw the fear in her eyes. Then he looked back at Veronica's sweet smile. She tilted her head, pursing her lips as if she pitied him. "Or maybe," she whispered, "you just feel bad for being away too long, so everything seems worse than it is. Don't blame yourself. Children copy the adults around them." The words slid out, soft as a whisper, but sharp as a knife. Mark looked at his children. Mia's dress wasn't just dirty. It was ripped in several places. Jamie was thinner than he remembered. Both children were trembling, not from cold, but from fear. For the first time in 8 months, Mark truly saw his children, and what he saw broke his heart into a million pieces. But before he could speak, Mrs. Gable appeared in the doorway. She was the kind elderly woman who had worked for his family for many years. She had watched Mia grow up from a baby. She had helped Sarah care for the house when she was alive. Now her face looked worried and sad. "Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Gable said quietly, "I didn't know you were coming home early." Mark noticed how Mrs. Gable's eyes darted quickly to the children, then to Veronica, and back to him. It was as if she wanted to say something but was too afraid to speak. "Mrs. Gable has been such a great help," Veronica said with her sweet smile. "Isn't that right, Mrs. Gable? She knows how difficult it can be to manage children when their father is away so long." Mrs. Gable nodded slowly, but Mark could see something in her eyes. It looked like fear. Mark knelt beside Mia. His expensive suit touched the floor, but he didn't care. "Sweetheart, what happened to your dress? Why is it torn?" Mia looked at her father with big, frightened eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but then she glanced at Veronica. The girl's mouth snapped shut again, as if she were too scared to pronounce the words. "Oh, that old thing." Veronica laughed lightly. "Kids play so roughly, don't they?" She was climbing trees in the backyard. "I told her to be more careful, but you know children." Mark touched the torn fabric. It wasn't ripped from climbing trees. It looked like someone had grabbed it and pulled. Hard. "Is that true, Mia?" Mark asked gently. "Were you climbing trees?" Mia's lower lip began to tremble. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at Veronica again, then at her father. Mia couldn't finish her words. She was too scared. Jamie, the baby, was still crying in Mia's arms. Mark reached out to take him, and when he did, he noticed something that chilled his blood. There were small red marks on Jamie's tiny arms. They looked like finger marks, as if someone had gripped him far too hard. "Veronica," Mark said, his voice growing deeper, more serious. "What are these marks on Jamie?" Veronica's smile faltered for a second, then returned, bright as ever. "Oh, those. He's been so fussy lately. Sometimes when I pick him up, I have to hold him firmly so he doesn't fall. Babies squirm, you know. The doctor said it's normal for babies to have little marks like that." But Mark knew what finger marks looked like, and these were not from holding a baby safely. Mrs. Gable cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Johnson, perhaps you'd like some coffee. You must be tired from your trip." Mark looked at Mrs. Gable. There was something in her voice, as if she wanted to speak with him alone. "Yes," Mark said slowly. "That sounds good. Veronica, could you please get Mia some clean clothes and maybe make sure Jamie has some milk?" "Of course, darling," Veronica said. But Mark noticed her smile seemed fake. "Now come on, children, let's get you cleaned up." "No," Mark said firmly. "I'll take care of them. You've done enough." The words came out sharper than he intended. Veronica's eyes flashed with anger for an instant before she put her sweet smile back on. "Whatever you think is best, dear. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." As Veronica walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, Mark felt as if he saw her clearly for the first time. When she thought no one was looking, her face changed. The sweet expression vanished, and something cold and wicked took its place. Mrs. Gable waited until Veronica was gone. Then she whispered, "Mr. Johnson, we need to talk." Mark nodded. He picked up Jamie carefully, feeling how light the baby was. Too light for 8 months. Mia clung to his leg, unwilling to let go. "It's okay, sweetheart," Mark told Mia. "Daddy's here now. No one is going to hurt you ever again." But as he said the words, Mark realized he didn't even know the whole truth. What had been happening in his house while he was gone? What secrets had been hidden from him? And most importantly, how long had his children been suffering while he was too busy to notice? The answers to these questions would change everything. But first, Mark needed to hear what Mrs. Gable had to say. Mark took Jamie up to the nursery with Mia following close behind. The room looked perfect, like everything else in the house. The walls were painted a soft blue. Expensive toys were neatly arranged on the shelves. But Mark noticed Jamie's crib was pushed into a corner, almost hidden behind a chair. "Mia," Mark said softly as he changed Jamie into clean clothes. "Tell me what your days are like when I'm not here." Mia sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her small legs. She looked down at her hands. We try to be good, Daddy," she whispered. "We try really hard." "What do you mean you try to be good?" Mia's voice got even smaller. "We have to be quiet, and we can't make a mess, and we can't ask for food when we're hungry unless it's mealtime." Mark stopped buttoning Jamie's shirt. "What happens if you're hungry between meals?" "Veronica, she says we're greedy. She says we should be grateful for what we get." Mark felt his chest tighten. "And what do you get to eat, sweetheart?" "Sometimes bread, sometimes just water." Mia looked up at her father with big, sad eyes. "Daddy, are we bad kids? Veronica says we're ungrateful because we don't appreciate how hard she works." Mark knelt in front of Mia and took her small hands. They felt so thin and cold. "No, my girl, you are not bad kids. You are good, sweet, wonderful children. And you should never, ever be hungry." Mia began to cry. Not the scared cry from before, but a cry of relief, as if she had been holding her sadness in for so long it finally had to come out. Mark held both his children. Jamie had stopped crying and was now looking at his father with curious eyes, as if trying to remember this man's face. "I'm sorry," Mark whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here to protect you." After getting Mia a clean dress and ensuring Jamie had milk, Mark went downstairs to find Mrs. Gable. She was waiting in the small room off the kitchen, the same room where she used to sit with Sarah when they planned meals together. "Mrs. Gable," Mark said, closing the door behind him. "Please tell me everything." The kind elderly woman looked at Mark with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Johnson, I should have called you sooner. I should have found a way to tell you, but she threatened me. She said if I said anything, she'd make sure I lost my job and that no one else would ever hire me." "She threatened you too, every day," Mrs. Gable nodded. "But the children owe Mr. Johnson what she does to those babies when you're not here." Her voice broke. "Tell me," Mark said, though his heart was already breaking. "She locks them in their rooms for hours, sometimes all day. She gives them one small meal and calls it teaching them gratitude. Last week, when little Mia spilled some juice, Veronica made her clean the entire kitchen floor with just a tiny rag. It took her 3 hours, and her knees were bleeding by the end." Mark felt sick. Mrs. Gable continued, "And the baby, Jamie, she barely feeds him. She says he cries too much and needs to learn to be quiet. Sometimes I hear him crying for hours, but she won't let me go to him." "Why didn't you call the police? Or me?" "I tried to call you once," Mrs. Gable said sadly. "But Veronica caught me. She took my phone and said if I ever tried again, she would tell you I was stealing money from the house. She said nobody would believe an old housekeeper over a rich man's wife." Mark realized how cunning Veronica had been. She had isolated everyone, the children, Mrs. Gable, even himself. She had made everyone too afraid to tell the truth. "There's more, Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Gable said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out her phone. I started taking pictures. I was so scared for the children. I had to do something, even if it meant losing my job." She showed Mark the photos on her phone. Pictures of Mia's bruised knees after being forced to scrub floors. Pictures of Jamie, too thin, with red marks on his arms. Pictures of the children's bedroom door, locked from the outside. Mark's hands were shaking as he looked at each photo. This was proof, real proof, of what had been happening to his children. "Mrs. Gable," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were so brave to take these pictures. You may have saved my children's lives. What are we going to do now, Mr. Johnson?" Mark was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I'm going to call my friend, Richard Price. He's a lawyer, a good one. We will make sure Veronica can never, ever hurt Mia and Jamie again. But Mr. Johnson, she'll fight back. She'll try to make it look like you're the bad father. She's very good at lying." Mark nodded. "I know, but I have something she doesn't have." "What's that?" "The truth. And people who care about these kids." Mark looked at Mrs. Gable with gratitude. "People like you, who were brave enough to gather proof even when you were scared." Just then, they heard Veronica's voice calling from the kitchen. "Mark, darling, I've made some tea. Why don't you come relax?" Mark and Mrs. Gable looked at each other. Veronica still thought she could control the situation with her sweet voice and fake smiles, but Mark was done being controlled. "Mrs. Gable," Mark said, "I want you to take the children to your room tonight. Keep them safe. Tomorrow morning I'm calling Richard and we will start the fight to protect Mia and Jamie properly." Mrs. Gable nodded firmly. "I'll keep them safe, Mr. Johnson. I promise." Mark took a deep breath. He was no longer the absent father burying himself in work. He was no longer the man who could be fooled by pretty lies. He was a father who had finally woken up, and he was ready to fight for his children, no matter what it cost. Mark had made his decision. Now, the real battle would begin. The next morning, Mark woke up early. He had barely slept, thinking about everything Mrs. Gable had told him. The photos on her phone kept flashing in his mind, his beautiful children, scared and hurt. After making sure Mia and Jamie were safe with Mrs. Gable, Mark went to his study and picked up the phone. His hands trembled as he dialed the number. "Price Law Firm," a kind voice answered. "This is Mark Johnson. I need to speak with Richard Price urgently. It's about my children." "Hold on, Mr. Johnson. I'll put you right through." In seconds, Richard's familiar voice was on the line. "Mark, it's been too long, man. What's going on?" Mark took a deep breath. "Richard, I need your help. My second wife, Veronica, she's been hurting my kids." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Mark," Richard said carefully, "that is a very serious accusation. Tell me everything." For the next 30 minutes, Mark explained it all. The finger marks on Jamie, Mia's torn dress and fear, the starvation, the locked rooms, Mrs. Gable's photos. "I have proof, Richard," Mark said. "Real proof, but I don't know what to do next." "The first thing we need to do is get those kids somewhere completely safe," Richard said. "Can you bring them to my office today? I want to see this proof, and we need to start documenting everything properly." "Of course. And what about Veronica?" "Don't tell her anything, not yet. We have to be smart about this. She is going to fight back hard when she realizes what's happening. Women like her don't give up easily." Mark felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "She's been living a comfortable life as your wife. She has access to your money, your house, your status. She is not going to let that go without a fight. She will probably hire her own lawyer and try to make you look like the bad father. But I have proof. And that's good. But Mark, you have to be prepared. This is going to be a long, ugly battle. She is going to lie. She is going to manipulate. She's going to try and make everyone believe that you are the problem, not her." Mark closed his eyes, thinking of Mia's scared face and Jamie's small, thin body. "I don't care how hard it is," Mark said firmly. "I'm going to fight for my children." "Good," Richard said. "That's what I needed to hear. Bring the kids and Mrs. Gable to my office at 2 p.m. today. We'll start building our case." After Mark hung up the phone, he felt both relief and fear. Relief that he finally had someone to help him. Fear for what Veronica would do when she found out. He went upstairs to check on Mia and Jamie. They were in Mrs. Gable's room, sitting quietly on her bed. Mia was holding Jamie, softly singing him the same lullaby their mother Sarah used to sing. "How are my babies?" Mark asked gently. "We're okay, Daddy," Mia said, but her voice was still small and scared. "I want you to know something very important," Mark said, sitting next to them. "You and Jamie are going to be safe now. I promise. I am never going to let anyone hurt you ever again." "And Veronica?" Mia whispered. Mark hesitated. He didn't want to scare her more. but he also wanted to be honest. "Veronica isn't going to be living with us anymore," he said carefully. "But she might try to say things that aren't true about Daddy. If anyone asks you questions, I want you to tell them exactly what happened, okay? Just tell them the truth." Mia nodded, but her eyes were still full of worry. "Am I going to have to talk to strangers? About the bad things?" Mark's heart broke. His little girl was only 6, and she was already worried about having to testify about abuse. "Maybe," Mark said honestly. "But if you do, Daddy will be right there with you, and Mrs. Gable will be there too. You won't be alone." At 1:30 p.m., Mark, Mia, Jamie, and Mrs. Gable got in the car to go to Richard's office. As they pulled out of the driveway, Mark saw Veronica watching from the front window. Her face looked angry, not sweet. She knew something was wrong. Richard Price had been Mark's friend since college. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a calm voice, exactly the kind of person you'd want on your side in a fight. After reviewing Mrs. Gable's photos, his face grew serious. "This is solid evidence," he said. "But Mark, Veronica is going to play dirty. She will hire Michelle Villa, the best defense attorney in the city, and she will paint you as an absent, negligent father." Richard knelt. "Mia," he said softly, "do you think you could tell a judge what happened when your daddy wasn't home?" Mia looked at her father, then at Richard. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Will the judge believe me?" "If you tell the truth, yes," Richard assured her. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "If it keeps Jamie safe, I'll tell them everything." 2 days later, the doorbell rang. It was a process server. Mark's heart pounded as he heard Veronica's shriek from upstairs. "What is this?" she screamed, running down the stairs, waving the custody papers. Her face was red with rage, her mask of sweetness completely gone. "How could you do this? After everything I've done for this family?" Mia and Jamie scrambled behind their father. "Veronica," Mark said calmly, "I think you should call a lawyer." "I don't need a lawyer. This is all lies." She pointed a trembling finger at Mrs. Gable, who was standing in the doorway. "This is your fault, you bitter old woman. You've been filling Mark's head with lies." "I only told the truth," Mrs. Gable said quietly. "The truth?" Veronica laughed, a cold, wicked sound. "You have no idea what you've started. I'm calling Michelle Villa right now." "She is going to destroy you in court!" She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was silent and intimidating. Mark held Mia's hand tightly. Across the room sat Veronica, dressed in a conservative navy blue dress, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the perfect picture of a grieving victim. Beside her sat her high-powered attorney, Michelle Villa Judge Angela Davis, a woman with kind but serious eyes, presided. "Mr. Price," she said, "please present your case." Richard stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because 2 children have been systematically abused, starved, and terrified by the woman entrusted with their care." He submitted Mrs. Gable's shocking photos as evidence. When Mrs. Gable testified, her voice was shaky but strong, describing the locked doors, the bleeding knees, and the constant sound of Jamie crying from hunger. Then Michelle Villa stood up. She was brilliant and terrifying. "Your Honor," Villa said smoothly, "my client, Mrs. Veronica Johnson, is the victim here. She married a man who, by his own admission, abandoned his children. Mr. Johnson traveled 20 out of every 30 days. He left 2 grieving, traumatized children with a woman who sacrificed everything to give them structure. What Mr. Price calls abuse, we call discipline. When Veronica took the stand, she cried, telling the judge how much she loved the children. "I never hurt them," she wept. "I was firm, yes. Mia is difficult, she lies, and Jamie cries constantly. I was alone, trying to manage, while their father chose his work over them." Mark felt sick. She was so convincing. Judge Davis listened to it all, her face unreadable. Finally, she said, "I have heard from the adults. However, before I make my decision, I want to hear from the child." She looked at Mia. "Mia, would you be willing to come up here and talk with me?" Mark's heart stopped. This was it. Mia looked at her father, who nodded, and then at baby Jamie in Mrs. Gable's arms. She stood up slowly. "Yes, ma'am," she said, her voice small but clear. I'll talk to you. She looked tiny in the big witness chair. Hello, Mia, Judge Davis said gently. I just want you to tell me the truth. Can you tell me what it's like at your house? Mia took a deep breath. When Daddy is home, she began, Veronica is nice. She smiles, and she makes good food, and she talks sweet. And what about when your daddy is not home? Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. Everything changes. She gets angry. She yells at us if we make a small noise or if Jamie cries. She says we're bad kids. What happens when she gets angry? She locks us in our rooms, sometimes all day, and she won't let us eat. What do you eat, Mia? Tears welled in Mia's eyes. Sometimes just bread, sometimes nothing until dinner. She says we're greedy. Jamie is always hungry. He cries because his tummy hurts, but she says he needs to learn to be quiet. Mia, the judge said, did Veronica ever hurt you with her hands? Mia nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. She grabbed my arms, really hard, and she grabbed Jamie too, even though he's just a baby. She said if I ever told Daddy, she would throw me and Jamie out on the street, and that nobody would ever want bad kids like us. Mia looked directly at the judge, her voice suddenly strong. But I can't be quiet anymore, because Jamie is too little to protect himself. Someone has to tell the truth. The courtroom was silent. Michelle Vila stood up for cross-examination, her smile gone. Mia, Vila said sharply, you miss your daddy when he's gone, don't you? Sometimes when we're sad, we misremember things, don't we? Isn't it true you were just mad at Veronica for making rules? No, Mia said, her voice clear. I know the difference between rules and being mean. My mommy Sarah had rules. Veronica was mean. It was too much for Veronica. Her composure shattered. That little liar! She suddenly screamed, jumping up from her chair. She's making it all up. I was nothing but good to those ungrateful children. Michelle Villa tried to pull her back, whispering, Veronica, stop. But it was too late. I gave up my life for them. Veronica shrieked, her face red and distorted with rage. They were spoiled brats who needed discipline. Someone had to teach them how to behave. If Mark had been a better father instead of ignoring them, none of this would have happened. Order! Judge Davis slammed her gavel, but Veronica's true nature was finally exposed to the entire court. Mrs. Johnson, you need to control yourself. You're all fools! Veronica sobbed as the bailiff moved toward her. Judge Davis looked at the hysterical woman, then at the brave, trembling child on the stand. She took a deep breath. Mrs. Johnson, your outburst in this courtroom confirms what young Mia has so bravely told us. I have heard all the evidence. She struck her gavel. I am granting Mr. Mark Johnson full and permanent emergency custody of his children, Mia and Jamie Johnson. A permanent restraining order is issued against Mrs. Veronica Johnson, prohibiting any contact. I am also referring this case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Mark rushed forward and swept Mia into his arms, tears of relief streaming down his face. You did it, sweetheart, he whispered. You saved us. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed into a kitchen filled with the smell of pancakes. Mark watched as Mia, now 8, knelt in the backyard garden, showing Jamie, now almost 3, how to water the tomato plants. They had rebuilt the garden as a memorial to Sarah, and it had become their place of healing. Look, Daddy, Jamie shouted, pointing at a red tomato. Mark smiled, his heart full. He worked from home now. He'd sold his top-floor office. He had never missed another bedtime story. The shadows were gone, replaced by laughter. I'm glad you came home that night, Daddy, Mia said, taking his hand. Mark knelt and pulled both his children into a hug. Me too, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I am never ever leaving again.